This is it. And 3, 2, 1. So let it be written. So let it be done. This is Tabletop Terrors. And James and I are going to hang out. Today it is a Sunday, almost 5 o'clock Eastern. I just finished in an amazing session wrap, like a campaign wrap party for Jeremy Lilly's Whispers and Fragments. But I'm here with James, and we are going to just talk about fun stuff, and we want you to be here with us. James, what do you got going on? What are you doing with your life?
Not much. I just finished. I had the urge suddenly to just repeat everything you said. No, I actually finished what I thought was a cool thing, a modular sort of game tool, and put it on our Patreon and began writing another one. Having found the shape that some of the things I want to write have taken, I feel sort of a new motivation to write some more. So that feels really cool, and that's mostly what I've been doing. That and playing a game called Dyson Sphere Program, which is really cool.
Okay, killer. Well, yeah, and I started reading that. James is talking about his Imagine It Better system, which is modular codified RPG rules that allow you to take a concept and rip it out of needing to exist in a single system, making it stand alone, so that theoretically when enough of these building blocks are done, you can have, backward compatible pieces to build any game engine.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was reading it. It actually looks really cool. And we can talk about that. There are a couple other things that I wanted to just bring up. We have Rakame in the chat. Hey, Rexman67 is here. Yes, it is time to start. Arcania Workshop, which is our good friend Scott. And then, of course, anyone else who joins us in the meantime. So, there's a system on our Patreon right now. It's a rule set that I created called Stalk the Monstrous. I'm saying that like that because when I said Stalk the Monstrous, someone was like, does it mean like a lady monster? I'm like, no. Like stalk monstrous things. So that someone thought I said stalk the monstrous. So it was actually Lloyd, Jarl DM, and he said, oof. Oof, Tim, did you say stalk the monstrous? No. But I wanted to talk to you about kind of the idea that I had. First, I want to say hi to Rob from Performance Check. Hey, Rob. Oh, he's doing some prep for his home game tomorrow. So, beautiful. Rob, let us know if you have any questions about stuff you're working on, and I will make James brainstorm it with me. Corey Hollenbach says, what's up? And Hellmage, of course, Matthew says, hey, guys, been a while since I poked my head in. Good to see you. It's good to see you, too. So, James, here's the pitch, and I'm thinking about running this.
Okay.
Taking that game that we created and actually running a purposeful comedy-style monster hunting game. And it's called... And by comedy, I mean it would be... And I have to find the tone by using references of other TV shows. But it would be... The name that popped into my head is called Mud Scrapers Limited.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
So yeah, that's the idea. Something like a 30-minute like Office style, like where there are real characters, there's heart, there's real monsters, but it's not about actually hunting the monsters. Everything would probably take place in the home base and like the problems that are always happening. Yeah. That's kind of how I imagine it, where it's like it's less
not about the monster hunting.
No.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking, and this is where I kind of wanted to talk to you about it. Would that work as an RPG? Because isn't it difficult if everything takes place in that office? Because it's one thing to have a script, it's another thing to have challenges that people have to overcome. Like, could that be a fun game, or would it have to be an actual comic? Or
so I absolutely think it could be a game, because just like we can have a bottle episode in television, and it's not exactly there, but it would be a lot of stuff. But like, think about all the antics they get up to in the office. It's always about something that's going on. They're changing our health insurance. We need to get a new chair and we can't agree. And, this person gets this person's chair, so they have something. It's like these generic things. It's just people wanting things and trying to get what they want. But like you said, if instead of paper they were monster hunters, I could see that being, I could see that being an RPG, absolutely. And especially a comedic one.
Right, and that's kind of the idea. Is I've never gone into an RPG with the thought of, hey, I'm going to play this funny.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that lately, where we make a lot of jokes, but just like TV shows, like a good example is in some TV shows, the name of every store is a pun, for example.
Yes.
I love stuff like that. So why don't you just say in your world, I've never seen rules like that for
sure.
Hey, we're playing this funny style of game. Every time we go somewhere, we have to figure out what kind of pun the name is, And things like that are just, you're going to have a hilarious game,
Right, and that's the exact kind of fun stuff. Like, it would be those kinds of running gags that are sort of the soul of it. And then, as you say, the roleplay elements are more like coming up with, hey, all of our weapons are made by this conglomerate.
Yeah.
So you can't use the best monster hunting weapons. You're not allowed to use a wooden stake. That's against the rules. You can't use that.
Yeah.
You have to use, polycarms, bicarbonate, wood substitute, or
exactly,
something like that.
Yeah. And okay, so O'Neill says, Corey says, office monsters. Hellmage, what's up? It's good to see you here again. But O'Neill says, funny usually comes in the moments. So this is very, very important, right? We usually have a script, but we don't have a script now. There's this secret. I say secret, right? But it's really, there's this pattern, I think, that can create the funny in the moments, but make sure that you don't have to be funny to play the game. Where one of the ways I think you can do this is if you take a situation and the game is figuring out why something is. Not whether or not it is, but why. So a perfect example. We're playing and we're like, oh, okay, I'm the boss in this case, right? And I'm like, all right, guys, we're not getting a shipment in of these, special kind of weapon. And somebody asks why. And you go, okay, well, we're not allowed to use them. The game is we are figuring out why we can't use them. We're brainstorming the funniest reason that one of our main things we're not allowed to use suddenly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because in a TV show, it is always something. And they come up with bananas reasons, but you're like, no, literally any reason you put on there. And then we'll figure out the details later. So you're like, oh, there was a shipment problem. Oh, that's fine. Oh, okay, the shipment was attacked by werewolves. Much better. You know what I mean? The werewolves. Now you're like, all right, well, the werewolves attacked the steak shipment because of the war with the vampires. Like, that's going to be the funny in the moment that we get later.
I love that. And I think that the way that I would handle it is, well, first of all, you could write the session by giving people outlines for a sitcom. Like, that's honestly how you do it. I would want it to be in the faux documentary style of something like The Office or Modern Family. Mm-hmm. And so there would be built-in player moments where you do these cutaways. And that's part of the structure of the game. So the idea would be, and that could be, we could decide whether or not the player can invoke that or the DM can invoke it. But like if the player goes cutaway and it shows them saying, so we got to the Medusa's nest and she's bald. And now what do you do? Like, and then there's this, this argument is like, well, we're supposed to take her head. And it's like, I don't know. That seems really mean. She's bald. Like, and then there's obviously got to be some sort of
talk about that thing. Yeah.
But I'm trying to figure out where would it have mechanics that were created for this type of game? Or would it be like this game we have, Stalk the Monstrous, where there's a little rule system, very rules-light kind of system, and then you play out those moments and then roll dice?
See, that's where I invented a whole brand new thing, because I want to be able to use this type of framework with any game.
Right.
Because why not? You know what I mean? If it's more a narrative framework like that. So I suppose if you were releasing it, I would have some simple mechanics to resolve some stuff, but it would overall be generation of the things, some of your constructs that might serve as like episode, guides, and generators for jokes and stuff. You know what I mean? So I could see it, if it had to stand alone, being a narrative fiasco style game where the point is getting to the end and like laughing about all the crazy things that happened.
That's kind of where I'm at.
I could see that being a game. Yeah.
I think that's more what actually maybe it would make a really funny fiasco set.
Well, and that's the main thing is Fiasco tells such a specific type of story. So imagine like a Fiasco set, but with our own very light rules of like, well, Fiasco really just has like, it's a little economy of how many bad things versus how many good things happen, based on what you roll. In this case, because you have your sitcom structure, I think it would be more like, again, no matter what happens, you have to go tell somebody, right? So you get to the Medusa's lair. She doesn't have hair. You are supposed to get her head, but then you get to talking to her, and it's like, oh no, it's her ex-boyfriend. She's been trying to be after her for a while, and so you go back and you just have to tell the guy like you didn't do it. You know what I mean? You didn't fail. The story is pitching that to the guy that's like, oh man, well I figured I'd try. I didn't realize she had an undercut when we dated, but I didn't think she'd shave it all off. You know what I mean? Like the joke is that Medusa didn't have hair and she has a normal lifestyle, and we're just playing that out.
And then the turn is that you get a call, the head, person gets a call, and she picks it up and she just looks and she goes, yeah. So it turns out that Medusa's power to turn people to stone is in their eyes, not the snakes. Okay. Yep. Yeah, we're in a lot of trouble. So
exactly.
But so then maybe the idea would be, and I'm not going to dig into exactly what the mechanics of the framework would be, like you said, like just come up with a narrative structure. But the thing I think that would be fascinating would be having the framework be the game. So you all have, whether it's dice or points you can spend or whatever, or just conversation, you get to say, okay, here's the subject of the stinger, what happens? So the subject of the stinger comes from like a roll table, or you can make it. Yeah. And you're basically, it's a role-playing game about sitcoms. And so someone would come up and you'd play out a little stinger. And then, okay, subplot A, this happens. And then you kind of it's a storytelling game. It's way less about winning or losing, like you say.
Exactly. It's just figuring out what happens in the situation, because anything has to. And the best success and the most catastrophic failure are both going to lead to a story. And we're not as concerned about which one it does,
Yeah. I was going to jump into the chat because...
Same, yeah.
Okay, yeah. If you want to, go ahead.
Well, I was really laughing at Hellmage said, we here at Weapon Makers Ltd know that vampires are a real problem, and this is why we've discontinued our premium wooden stake line and replaced it with our more accessible origami stake line. All the woodenness and all the sharpness, unknown levels of a structural integrity. That's the sort of joke that you get if you're an Office Monsters thing, and the point is to just figure out jokes,
That's it. And the idea is like putting in there somewhere there's a Weapon Makers Limited thing. So the thing that comes up is, Weapon Makers Limited is going to be a part of this scene. And then playing out how. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So let's see. Alex Randolph says, I've watched you learn to play D&D from 4 years ago, probably 100 times. I got a first beginner set and I really want to play, but I have no friends. I was thinking of playing by myself. That is possible. Kind of like writing my own story. I know that technically makes no sense and won't work probably. It could. But it's the best I got. Any thoughts on that? I will jump over quickly and say, I do have some thoughts on that. There are a lot of places you can find games. I would recommend the Absolute Tabletop Facebook group. It might take you a while to get into some games. On our channel, there are some videos about finding a group and playing your first session and those kinds of things. I would dig into those. You can message Tabletop Terrors on Facebook, message us on Facebook, and we can kind of give you some more pointers. But it's kind of like dating. You just kind of got to start, and then it's not always going to work on the first try, but eventually you'll meet your group. Let's see. Is there anything else you wanted to say to that, James, or should I just jump to the next?
No, I think that's perfect, yeah. Because and somebody else mentioned, hey, have you tried asking in the Absolute Tabletop Facebook group if anyone has room for a new player? That is one of the tips you'll find in some of those videos Tim mentioned.
It is, and I don't want to go into making that video, the diet video here. So, but yeah, that's the place I would start. And just tell them, hey, Tim and James sent me to the group looking for a new game. Can anybody give me pointers, or are there any games? So, let's see here. Oh, Master of the Game is here. What's up, man? What are we discussing? Right now we're discussing what we're considering to be like kind of a rule set concept where you make a sitcom, but the pitch that I had is called Mud Scrapers Limited, and it's about this sort of like franchised monster hunting thing. It would be set in current day. So yeah, that's what we're talking about. But I am going to jump after we hit the chat. I have another thing I wanted to talk to you about, James, because I had an idea. Rexmun67 said, just wanted to say thanks for the Learn to Play D&D series. Haven't played in over 40 years, and it brought me back. I'm still a player. Brought it all back to me. You're very welcome. And there's more of those in the works for sure. Performance says, what a treat. I have a corridor under the influence of illusionary magic. It is designed to lock adventurers in an endless circuit. You often say prep problems, not solutions, but what hints, tools, or methods could I help prepare to help them break or escape the illusion and not leave it to simple saving throws? James, what do you think? He's got this corridor that is under the influence of an illusory spell to make the adventurers just go down. Didn't you do something like this to us?
No, you did something like this to us.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
But the thing I wanted to say is, Rob, I love that idea. I think it's okay. Okay, what I will say is we do often say prep problems, not solutions. But in some cases, you can prep solutions. But what you also need to prep is lead up to it making sense and the players getting there. So obviously at some point, like a worse GM than you might find themselves not making it explicitly clear to the players that they're going around in a circuit, right? They might waste time like, oh, it looks like it's changing, but it's not. You know what I mean? Like, so I think one of the most important things is being very explicit with your players in what's happening, because as soon as they realize you're going in a circuit, make it about trying to solve the problem, and then just tell them about things that are happening and make one of them kind of lead to a solution or give them something. You know what I mean? Basically, they just need to come up with any solution, and then if it's good enough, that gets to be the solution.
Yeah. So I will piggyback right off of what you just said, James, and I will say that. So what I think you could do, Rob, is that alone is enough. You say, and I agree with what James is saying. Say, you can tell that this is an endless corridor that you will be stuck in forever if you can't get out. Making that clear right up front, and they're like, oh no. Now that they understand what they're up against. Now, if you want to obviously do the Rob Coletta where there's this cool narration, of how that looks and the sconces passing by, or you think you passed that thing, whatever cool narration, but then make it clear with an exclamation point. You are going to be stuck here forever. It's repeating. Then say, due to the illusory and strange nature of this place, normal saving throws and skill checks and those kind of things aren't going to work. What do you do to get out? And now you're telling them that you're specifically trying to not just do rolls. So they go, oh, okay. And they'll just start looking at their sheet. They'll start coming up with stuff. And I think that'll get the ball rolling. And then when there's something that they throw at you that you like, say, yeah, that'll work. Let's try that. And then figure out how to play it out,
Yeah, I think that's awesome. In my mind, Rob was going to respond. I was like waiting to hear what he had to say.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, wait, that's not how this works.
He just pops in. It's great because overworked.
Alex said he's got to go. Sorry, I was going to say thanks for tuning in.
See you later, Alex. Have a good study sesh. I was just going to say that overworked CNA says, oh, performance checks, that is dirty. And Rob says, pure filth.
The way he does. Yeah, no, that's perfect.
And then Master of the Game says, not much, just hanging out and saw you guys were live. Yeah, we kind of went live impromptu. We had a bit of a shift. We were going to record some videos, but there was some shifting. And so we're like, you know what? We kind of feel like doing a live stream. So we dove in and we thought we would do that. Cole says, Tim had an idea. Yay. This usually presages good stuff. So I had this was my idea.
Okay.
Excuse me. That was it. It was a muted burp where I put the backs of my fingers over my lips. What do you think? Can we make a book out of that?
I've got some thoughts.
So, what if you approached a campaign with the intention of turning it into a written work? You know?
Okay. Yeah.
A lot of times we play a campaign, and in retrospect, we think about the great stories that we told. What if the idea was that you say, okay, everybody, here's a social contract. Here's the idea for the story I had. What kind of characters would you come up with? And really what you're doing is you're mixing a writer's room with a D&D game.
Yeah.
And doing it on purpose. So rather than finishing and going, man, that would have made a really great story, saying, hey, I had this story, and then basically giving it to the rest of the writers, which are your players in that case. You're the showrunner, you're the game master, and then you say, all right, so in episode 1, because then if you have people who are experienced enough, at least with writing, then they can say, oh, okay, well, I think the character would kind of do this. Adding a layer of meta on purpose so that it's not just role play, but thinking in terms of episodes, cliffhangers, and that sort of thing, so that you're writing the thing, and then when you finish a season or you finish half of a season, the intention is to then take that thing you've made, which is your first draft, and then go back and rewrite it as a show or a comic or whatever.
Yeah. No, I think it's really good, especially what you mentioned about the extra meta layer. One of the biggest things about talking about it in concepts of like television is that those exist in our world and between us. You know what I mean? It gives us an immediate shared context. Like you said, to be able to say things like cliffhangers or, oh no, I want this, their B plot is going to be this, or the fact that every character needs to do something in an episode, right? You know, or at least has to go off on vacation and there's a reason they're gone. Those concepts are so instilled in shows that we don't need to come up with them. And I think that's one of the most important things. To do a quick detour, one of the next patterns I was working on was what I call the generic rarity pattern. Because in video games, there's kind of become a standard of like the colors of rarity for things. The thing is, you can use that for anything. If somebody shows up, you know, in your world, like a priestess of fire, and I'm like, oh, and you're describing it really cool, I can ask you, all right, what rarity would you say that is? You're describing it like it's awesome, but is this very common? Is this not that common? And using a scale that exists outside of this game we're playing means we're immediately on the same page if you're familiar with that scale. You know,
sure.
And so it's the same with the role playings, where if you add that extra meta layer, you reap a lot of benefits from that, because you can even give somebody something to research. Hey, go look up how B plots work in shows, and we'll be able to, you know, incorporate it into the game. Things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's first of all, I love that idea, because like you said, it takes me as a GM. I'm sitting here and I describe this really cool thing. And if you ask, okay, so did you describe that because it was the first time we saw it?
Yeah.
Or like you say, is it purple? Is it legendary? Or is it a blue? Or is it just, this is Dragon Grin? You know?
Exactly. Like that, the ability to ask that meta question is so helpful.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And so the thing I was going to lean into is say that the other thing that would be, I think, in players' minds is knowing that it's what serves the story. So if you know you're writing something, it's not just about like, I really want to use this ability or do this thing. It's more like, yeah, that would work really well, but I think for the story, it's this extra layer. It's not just role-playing. It's, I'm going to role-play this character as well as I can, but I'm actually not going to do this because it would work better if this person tried to do something differently. Like, maybe even having meta discussions about the flow of the episode during the session.
Yeah, and in general, so we're talking about this in this context, right, for this sort of system or whatever. But I think in general, agreeing on what your goal is when playing the game beforehand can be helpful, even if you're not using, you know, quite as heavy meta tools, because of exactly what you said. In my opinion, I want to play a game that is satisfying narratively. That means that we can't always win. You know, that means certain things to me. That means that sometimes if there could be a happy ending, it's better if they just miss it.
Yeah.
That's not satisfying all the time if it's your character. But if we all agreed that we're trying to decide on this thing all together, sometimes those things make sense. So yes, I think in general that agreement of I want my part of the story to be making the story the best that it can be, not necessarily making my character the best that it can be. You know?
And that's
so I'm so on board with that.
That's a great distinction and I'll jump to the chat here because we've had a lot of people jump in. But the thing I was going to say, the ultimate distinction here, and then we'll move on, is that in a writer's room, nobody owns any character. Everyone owns the show. And so what would be really interesting is having a dynamic and building a language where I could say, hey, I think that this character would do this right now. I mean, what do you think about that? And it would be a weird kind of thing to add to RPGs, but just to give you an idea of what I'm trying to get out of this, there's one thing to sit around a writer's room, and I'm never going to have that happen anytime I say never. It's not going to happen anytime in the future, but what I can get is a group of my friends that I know are great storytellers and love to play D&D to sit and play a session with me that could end up being an episode.
Yeah.
So that's my goal here, is to combine the two where we all get to play a rad RPG, but then have this tiny meta layer of like, hey, I plan on serializing this on purpose. So just keep that in mind as we talk.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I didn't consider it where, like you said, you plan on writing it out, because I would like my games to have some of these structures anyway. And, I'm considering concepts that make them do some of the same things.
Right.
Because like what you said about controlling other characters, one thing I have an idea for is a thing where you set it up so that you have it in mind that people are going to play different characters. So like you said, it seems weird to add that to RPGs. I think it is absolutely the next reasonable step, where you're playing an RPG and you have characters to choose from in scenes. Now, some of those may have been ones you've created, and the level to which you own one versus others can vary. But for example, some of the way jokes get written in writers' rooms, for example, is like when there's a character that has to say something in this scene. Like one of my favorite examples is Gene Belcher in Bob's Burgers. Because he has this very, very, very specific type of sort of dirty kid humor where it's not overt, and sometimes he doesn't realize exactly what he's saying, but he's like a young boy, and you're like, I love the idea of alternates to every Gene Belcher joke. I want a part of the role-playing game where we pitch alternates for a very specific scene where we go, what's the funniest joke we can think of in this case? But great. It doesn't matter that it's your character. We all get to go, well, I know my Gene would say this. Is it on the top of the pile? Did somebody else come up with something better? That game is so much fun to me. So, yeah, I really like that.
And just to kind of speak to what alternates are, if you haven't ever seen this in a lot of the animated comedy shows, what they do is they have what's written in the script, and then they let the actor, the voice actor, along with a room full of funny people, just fire off one-liners. And then, like you say, top of the pile wins. So at the end of the day, the funniest thing when they're going back and editing the audio together is the joke that they put in there. That's why sometimes it's so outlandish. You're like, how could they possibly write that? They might not have. It could have been one of these super talented voice actors just being crazy, or like Dan Harmon saying, hey, say something about this. And
exactly, the important part to me there being that iteration of going with the 10th one, not the first one,
Right, and then having the luxury after having, say, 6 of these sessions, going back and re-listening to them and typing them out and going, actually, this would have been better if it was foreshadowed here, and you put, So
exactly, especially in those cases. Yeah, no, absolutely.
So some shout-outs. Bronchitis is here. So what is going on? The Raven Rolls, what's up, Paul? Unnamed Production Company. I know it's been a while, but Unnamed said the setting and the rules would have to be super tight. I think they're talking about the sitcom show, which I agree with. Rob thanked us. He said he hadn't thought about telling them off the bat that saves just won't work. Yeah, right? It's crazy.
Yeah, that's
the kind of thing
that's perfect, yeah.
I've just learned that looking back, I'm like, man, what if I just told them?
What if I just made it clear what I wanted them to do and then had fun letting them try it?
That's it. Corey Hollenbach says, this system seems like it could be bundled with a manual that looks like a pulp monster comic, something that you could just grab and go, mostly theme stuff you can add to make the game. Exactly. Like all the lists of things that you could put into scenes and stuff like that. Jason Smith is in the house. Oh, actually, do you have the chat pulled up?
Yeah.
Can you read Hellmage's comment under Jason Smith's Haya? Because I think it's directly related to your Rarity system.
Oh, yeah. He goes, it's similar to distance. In a fantasy world, meters or feet probably didn't develop, but it's hard to come up with and learn new measurement systems, so you fall back on commonly understood system. Absolutely. And that's what's crazy is I found that video games fell into a pretty basic pattern, and that pattern has a lot of helpful things about it that make it easy to pick up. Like, we've landed on a very refined concept because it's been iterated so long. So I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to keep using that. I'm not going to try to come up with my own. So absolutely.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Red King GM says The Expanse is basically the dream. The Expanse is a phenomenal show. It's one of my favorite shows in terms of space combat. The momentum in it. So if a ship is going to change course, they float while their thrusters are, kind of changing, and the weapons are 360. They have cannons all over the ship. It's just really well thought out, and it's fun.
Yeah. It's very realistic. It's very hard sci-fi, realistic sci-fi, and the combat comes out so cool.
It's just like the kind of the tracers in space and everything. So yes. Cole Spark says, "Isn't Jeremy doing a game where everyone has 2 PCs? I think it's the game he's going to be running on MTD, Mini Train Domain." He is doing that game. Matt Click of AbTab and A Fistful of Dice is in that game. And Jeremy is a good friend of mine, so I know some secrets about that game that I'm not allowed to share, but I will say that it is going to be really cool. The Jeremy you expect is going to show up in force. Bronhitis says, "Either Tim is a dwarf or that blue glass is Tarrasque-sized." So this is Tarrasque-sized. Let me show you. This is a can of Monster Energy drink, and this is the cup.
It's a pretty big can. Yeah.
Some would argue that this is a vase or a vase. I can guarantee you that I'm probably drinking. What are they? The BPAs?
Yeah.
This cup is from 2001. And I'm not saying it could be from before then, but that's when someone gave it to me.
Right? Yeah, you're like, that wasn't its birthday. This cup's from 2010.
That wasn't its birthday. Performance Check says, "Sitcoms are often written with character archetypes. The deadbeat dad, the nerd, the underdog. Would this game encourage these archetypes in character creation?"
So I have...
Tell me.
Okay, so here's what's interesting.
Bye, Corey.
In TV shows... Oh, yeah. See you, Corey. Oh, yeah, he says he's got to go. He's drinking out of a vase. Yes, Cole, he is. No, so what I like is they are written with archetypes, but actually The Office and stuff is a really good metric to measure by. And if you think about it, The Office, imagine that everybody has a couple of archetypes. It's kind of like when they come up with a story, there's a little bit of like, who would this happen to and who could they do it with? You know what I mean? So I wouldn't necessarily give archetypes in character creation, but it would be like certain people would have almost certain jobs. This is going to be a very basic understanding of it, but it's like one person might be the boss, one person might be HR, one person receptionist, one person sales, to literally use analogs from The Office. In those cases, it would be a little less archetypes, but more lenses of like, well, what would a receptionist have to say about this? What would the lowest performing salesperson have to say about this? So it's like archetype lenses that accumulate and change out, Yeah,
and I think what you could do is, to avoid it being too typecast, it could be a job mixed with some traits.
Yeah, I imagine it would be like a few things, and like when stuff happens, you'd add and remove stuff.
Yeah, so like let's talk about Pam from The Office real quick. It would be like the job is receptionist, but that could change because she becomes a salesperson later, and then later she,
Yeah, so and then she leaves, and then she's the office manager. Mm-hmm. Like it's mutable.
Right. So there's that, and then the list of traits could be like she's, clever, she's, sympathetic, a little dorky. Now you could swap that around so that you could have that same person who's a salesperson or works in the warehouse. So maybe it's like a mixture of traits, and that you just make it a rule that no one can share the same 2 traits or something like that.
Well, yeah, and so the way I see that going is with the thing I recently released, the identity pattern, it's perfect for stuff like this because the point is to have a certain, you can almost guarantee a certain what's it called when things are strewn throughout, distribution of the types of people and stuff, so that by writing like the play set, you can decide how many people can be dorky, and it's not necessarily in the mechanics. So
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
slight distinction there, but the important thing being, what was the important thing? Oh, that by doing that and by having a person play it, these types of things of having like a container of things that talks about a character, that describes a character, these are the things that allow us to have other people play them. And so maybe a little less for like our characters, but I do love the idea that some of the bit characters, everybody gets a chance to play. They get to play their version of Todd Packer, who we know is this, this, and this.
Yeah. And
so that it's like interchangeable a little bit, you know. But so I like it being traits and like the way people act, because then people don't always act that way. But if you're Pam, you go, I think she would say it this way because she's a little dorky, you know.
Yeah, and
maybe
that
can have a mechanical effect, but yeah.
Right, some kind of a, like you say, yeah, I like it. So, Shock 1999 says, Gene Wolfe's measuring system, everything Book of the New Sun equals galaxy brained. Oops, those are my trigger words. I gotta go, and I'm a sleeper agent.
I gotta go.
Boxcar. Shock 1999 is Baron Zemo, and I am the Winter Soldier. This is gonna get really weird for everybody. Hey, what's up, Zachary? Overworked CNA says about my vase cup. I'm sure the carcinogens have leached it out by now.
Oh yeah, right. It's been long enough. You drank them all by now.
Yeah.
There's just new ones breeding in there. That's how they work. I don't know.
So, I have something else I wanted to bring up, but I wanted to throw it to you if there was anything you wanted to bring up. In particular, if you got something you wanted to say or talk about.
Not really. Just, yeah, I mean, I could talk more about this, but yeah, whatever you have, I'm down.
So, I'm starting to write some fiction in Dragon Grin. It's a campaign setting that we made, and one of the things I'm realizing is, in the book that we made, it's almost 500 pages. It's like if you took the entire Marvel Universe and put it in a book. So it's not cleanly, you know, this part of New York City where Spider-Man is and this part of New York City where Daredevil is. It's like, hey, this is the entire MCU. So one of the challenges that I was having was, you know, like, where do I start? Because if I'm going to start telling stories in Dragon Grin, I'm going to assume that people don't know what it is. So
yeah.
I'm a huge fan.
You have to give them everything they need.
That's it. So there has to be an establishing shot of the world before you subvert it, or else everything you show first will be what they think is the norm.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of cool that the world is so different. But if I show them, you know, the desert world of Jahar, the desert continent, they're going to think it's a desert place. And then when you go to the jungle, they're going to be like, wait, what? So I'm a big fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think Kevin Feige is one of the best producers of our time, maybe ever. So I'm like, what did they do right? And so I had some ideas, and I wanted to run them by you.
Yeah.
So if I'm pitching Netflix my show, I'm going to pitch them similarly to how the Marvel Cinematic Universe does it. I'm like, all right, I'm going to tell one focused, concentrated story first to establish all the norms of Dragon Grin. And then all the places we go beyond that, we can just do our thing. You can have your Guardians of the Galaxy.
Relative to that, yeah.
Exactly. You can't have Guardians of the Galaxy without anchoring an Earth with Iron Man and the Avengers.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. So for that, to us, it would be like, you can't have this crazy story about traversing the weirdness of the bleak if you don't have the whatever that norm is. So I was kind of going back and forth. I'm like, well, what would it be? Would it be, you know? So this is the idea. This is my pitch. And it's just the start of it. It's more of a concept than anything. The opening shot is this toiler, this farmer, kind of very standard classic fantasy. And then everything seems very normal. And then as it pans up, it's this beautiful, idyllic, everything's fantastic. Kind of this bird flies overhead. And then it pans up and you see the dark spires of Grin. This like, and then it pans even further up and you see like an Arcseer flying overhead. But the farmer doesn't react.
Yeah.
He or she just like tips their hat to the Arcseer, this crazy looking thing flying on a beast above, just tips their hat and keeps farming. And I thought, that's the establishing shot, because I want to show that this is normal. I want to show first that this is a fantasy realm. Oh, it's normal fantasy. And then it's like, whoa, is that like Mordor-ish? Why is that farmer acting normal? So how does that hit you?
I think it's awesome. I think it's really cool. It feels like that scene where it pans up and you see all that and then the title screen shows up. You know what I mean? Like it has all the elements. So I'm like, yeah, no, it absolutely works.
So then my other thought is, okay, so how do I tell this story where I can introduce all of the concepts of Dragongrin without it feeling like silly? Like you don't want to cram too much in and what's important and all this, right? So then I thought, all right, so then, and I don't know exactly who and what the cast would be and all that stuff, but the idea would be that in that same place, so it takes place in Grin, because I'm thinking in Grin you're going to have the Arcseers, you're going to have a ton of marrow, you're going to have war makers, you're going to have like regular fantasy,
heavy hitters,
regular fantasy set against the weirdness of Dragongrin and like the time anomalies, all the things that are pretty, I think, important to the setting. But how do you kind of lay that out to the viewers without it being like every single scene or every plot point is like this info dump? So I thought, what if I make it so that the main characters are having this problem with their tome heart because they've just become awakened? So what happens is in Dragongrin, there are these constructs, kind of like these robots, more or less, and they are subservient, but can in fact become awakened in a lot of cases. They'll forget everything. And so I thought, what I'm now doing is I'm putting this tome heart in the place of the audience, and this person is now having to deal with this thing that they own that is now not knowing how to act in Dragongrin and causing a lot of trouble for this person.
Yeah.
So this owner, we'll call him owner, this owner is saying to the tome heart, like, stop it, don't do that. It's like, why? It's like, what are you talking about? That's the marrow. It would basically just introduce the audience, because the audience is this tome heart. Like, why is that dangerous? Why isn't he running from this? Why is this happening? So I thought that would be a good way to have the audience be the tome heart and kind of just do the greatest hits of Dragongrin. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. It's a common narrative tool to have somebody that is like, wait, what? You know what I mean? Like the anytime you hear somebody in a TV show going, wait, you don't know the story of whatever, that is the show going, hey, somebody has to not know because we got to tell the viewer, right?
Exactly.
So it's the perfect thing. I was going to mention that is a common pattern, and one of the reasons, I hate to even say this, but I think it's true, one of the reasons the sort of hero's journey works so well is because a reluctant hero and a reluctant character in general often becomes somebody that has to have everything explained to them. You know what I mean? Like they become that where it's like, oh, what's up with the marrow? Oh, you because they're getting in trouble with the marrow, you get to explain how the marrow work. Because they're not, nice to the guys. They're constantly learning Dragongrin, and you're teaching the readers on the way. And I'm like, no, I think that's perfect.
Yeah, and each episode would pretty much feature, obviously there's an overarching plot, but each episode would feature some sort of new facet of Dragongrin. They'll be like, all right, well, we got to go to the Red Sail Market. And then you get to show the Red Sail Market and do this whole deal. So
exactly.
I have the next phase of how I would see it as like the first season, but before I do that, I want to jump into the comments because I don't want to go too rambly. Overworked CNA. I like it. Simple but efficient. Rickame says, that is awesome. Zachary says, but does Dragongrin have a frozen hellscape like Icewind Dale? I will answer that. I think someone did down below. Rob
Alex
says,
did, yeah.
So cool. Super keen to hear about the characters in this Dragongrin story. With this setting, I imagine the diverse regions being explored by different viewpoint characters, good and bad. Rob, that is exactly right. And real quick, I will answer Zachary's question. The reason why I liken it under the MCU is I have to look at it as a universe. It's the whole universe. And the MCU has done that, over 22 films?
Yeah.
So I believe that there are ways to tie in various ways all of these different regions. And what I would do is I would treat each region as its own movie. It has to be standalone. The stories you tell there have to be really good and focused on that, but it has to tie into the bigger narrative of the world and bring all those things together. We saw this successfully in the first few seasons of Game of Thrones, I think.
Yeah.
Where you see the stuff that's going on across the world, how it ties into the political landscape of what's going on in King's Landing. But yeah, exactly. Overworks. Oh, James, you mentioned Leith. That's exactly right.
And that's what Alex said. He said it is called Varnholm, if I remember correctly, and I mentioned... I only remember it so specifically because it is now a part of Varnholm that originally used to be its own insider Dragongrin trivia there, but that means nothing. But yeah, so... And then Overworked CNA said, so Leith is basically Siberia. And I said, yes, you don't want to start a land war in Leith, certainly not in the winter. I didn't say that second part, but now we got to put it on the stream.
Fantastic. Oh, and Cole says, exactly, teaching a neophyte in order to teach the audience. Right. Becomes a show, don't tell kind of thing. And that's the exact thing. We see this, like James said, it's a very popular narrative device, whether it's C-3PO in Star Wars or...
Yeah.
Like, we've seen this a bunch of times, and if you handle it the right way and subvert the trope a little bit, I think it could be really cool.
Yeah. Zachary said it's a cool way to show all the different, let's call them biomes, and I think that fits. Would be to have the character start in different environments, show off those settings bit by bit, and then have them, all teleported to meet, or in general, meet up.
Right.
And yeah, I think you get a lot of different parts. There are so many parts that it's like, yeah, it would certainly be, you'd want to tell the story a few different places, like you said in Game of Thrones, so that it wasn't also all just the one place, so that people get the wrong impression there too, Yeah, it's a delicate balance, kind of,
Right, and so one of the things that I've found in television that I like is you move slowly on season arcs, but move quickly on those seasons coming to an end. So, like, I'll give you an example of what I mean. You start with one small story, and then you really milk that, and don't be afraid that it's a small story. The perfect show that does this is Peaky Blinders.
Yeah.
Where it's like, there's this thing that happens to a small gang, and the whole first season, there's like 6 full episodes, a full arc of this one little thing. But it's very big to them. And then they slowly scale it up, rather than, you don't jump straight to Mordor.
Exactly. You tell the small story first, get the established context, and then you can start adding to it, just like you said. No, I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So then here, and I have some questions in the chat. I see those, but I'm going to say that. So then, to me, though, what I've described is the good start to something, but it doesn't have enough bones and meat to be a show.
Yeah.
And I think that there needs to be an element. I don't have the answer to this, but I have the general idea, which is in Grin, there is something called the Council of Ash, and there are these different seats among the Council of Ash, and they're all responsible for different facets of the high view of what's going on in Dragongrin. So it's like, think evil The West Wing.
Yeah, okay.
Where their whole deal is to make sure that the dismembered lord can focus on big, high-level things that keep the world intact while they're dealing with major issues in the region.
Yeah.
So somehow, and I wanted to see how this hit you, what I want to do is, because I love the whole, like, common person gets pulled into the, like, bigger world at large.
Yeah.
I like to think that somehow or some way, put a pin in it, we'll make it work for reasons, that this person's family and their tome heart, similar to how, like, Ned Stark got pulled out of King's Landing, or pulled out of the north to go to King's Landing, there's a reason why this person and their tome heart are pulled in to one of the seats of the Lord of Ash. Not literally the seat, but, like, I imagined that it would be something like there's a job in Dragon called the Missive Crow. It's basically a letter carrier. I almost think it would be really interesting if this person, for some reason, was called upon to be the Missive Crow of one of the people of the Council of Ash.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're standing by while letters are being written. So they don't immediately start in this high place of power, but they're in the room where it happens, the room where it happens. Yeah. So, and somehow the Tome Heart's involved. I don't know. But so pulling this normal family into this world where you're now
high-powered intrigue world.
Yes. Because it also factors in the Crucian houses, which are like these houses that kind of rule Grin and have these like rivalries and stuff. So I don't know. Do you think, do you have any pieces to that? Does that make sense? You got any ideas or?
It does make sense. I think in general, the Missive Crow thing is huge, you know, because that just gives you so much. Like a Missive Crow story is, I don't know. It's like, to me, it feels like one of the stories you would tell, like saying it's a smuggler story in Star Wars, you know. It's not the Jedi, but it's like there's so much there that having a Missive Crow is, I think, a big deal. And I think I do really like that. The thing you haven't really touched on that I imagine would get added are the dilemmas they face and how that leads to them getting where they are, right? Because they couldn't really say no, but, you know, what does it mean? And am I just going to be able to do this quickly? Can I get out of this? You know, maybe they were in the wrong place at the wrong time and had to deliver something. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
we were getting into details basically, but depending on the details, I think that there's a lot of meat there to slowly lead into all the Crucian houses and kind of the intrigue portion. And in that way, establishing sort of more common Dragon Grin, and then the mixture being once they meet, you know?
Yeah, and the way that I would handle that is that, so I don't have the specifics, but the way that I've learned is like you take someone's intent and then you put the biggest obstacle you can in front of it. So I would make it, for whatever reason, this person who's the Missive Crow wanted something that is over here, and in between that, they have to overcome being the Missive Crow for someone on the Council of Ash. Where it's like, to do what I really want to do, I have to get out of doing this other thing, which is, like you say, like impossible. So basically give them something else that they want really badly, that's really important to them, and then take it as far away from them as you can.
Well, and it's funny because like that part I feel like you've done. That's what making them be a Missive Crow. Presumably they don't want to have anything to do with the high power world of Dragon Grid.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so I feel like you've done that, and I think some of the decisions that makes, like, because then why them? You know what I mean? Answering that question will really get us into some interesting stuff, because there's some reason, you know, we have at play the powers of being able to see in the future and everything in Dragon Grin. So maybe somebody knows something, you know, maybe answering that question will get you a lot, because maybe somebody pulled all the strings to make them get there so they could be part of the resistance. They just didn't get to that part yet. You know, like the why it's them and they're struggling with that question, as well as in general the stuff they'll have to deal with, I think would tell a great story.
Yeah, that's true. And so maybe, and I'll jump to the chat because there's been a lot of good stuff and I've just been really inspired. But so maybe immediately have them gain information that they should never know.
Yeah. And like, but in a sense, through no fault of their own is what I'd like. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
Where it's like,
yeah. Like, it's like, I wish I never found this out.
But now you're enemy of the state, or, you know, like one of those, like where you're on the run, or suddenly you're like, I just want to go home.
Okay. So here you go. So what if it's a letter, and for whatever reason, whether it wasn't sealed or whatever, it's from one council member to another, but it's not specific, talking about the murder of a third council member. So it doesn't say who.
Okay, yeah.
You see what I mean? Like, there's two people in the council, and there's obviously a mystery here where it's like, whether one is named, like, you know, da-da-da-da, and the other one's named ba-ba-ba-ba, but that's not their actual names. They're like, maybe they have nicknames for each other on the council, and now this person's trying to figure out. Yeah, or it's like in
code or something.
Right, or like Crucian code, right. And so okay. You know what I mean? And they
what if? Exactly. And that's the thing. what if, because the Missive Crows, I don't remember exactly how far we went in the book, but there'd be very complicated magical methods of sealing and, all these things, whatever. And there's some trust there. I like the idea that they deliver an unsealed letter that they haven't read, but that they had to take from the Missive Crow that was killed because he unsealed it. You know what I mean? Like one of those where he's thrust in the middle and he doesn't know why.
Right. I love it.
Did his job, but somebody's like, no, you're a loose end now. I don't care if you read it. I have to kill you. And then another Lord of Ash, maybe one of the ones that's killing, is like trying to get that same information. And so now he's like, protect it. I don't know.
Right.
Then he's in it and he's like, what is happening?
So for a whole episode, it would be going back and forth between who it might be talking about it in the letter. Because think about it. If my Lord of Ash gets killed or my Council of Ash seat member, that maybe I want that.
Yeah,
then I can go home. So I'm trying to play like me. So I'm trying to find out. Yeah. So anyway, so I think that there's some bones there, but I think by doing that, you then get to deal with the marrow, the places in Grin, the Crucian. You kind of get this establishing shot, and then you start spanning out, toward places like Sphere and these different things.
Yeah.
I definitely want to jump to the chat. There's a ton.
Yeah, I was gonna say we
stuff.
should, because there's.
Do you want to have anything? That's
no. Yeah, let's jump to the chat. That's perfect. I do want to have something later. But
yeah,
has no bearing on what we're talking about now.
Do you know where we need to jump in the chat? Is really what I was gonna say.
Yeah. So okay. So the main question, the last question was, hey Tim, are there any Dragon Grin games coming to the channel? I'd love to see more live plays in that spooky land. And Cole Sparks and Zach both seconded and thirded Matthew's question. So Tim, hit us with it. I don't know. You don't have an announcement, probably.
I do have an announcement, and it comes with an apology. Probably like 3 times I've tried to get campaigns going in Dragon Grin, but it was during the writing of A Dead Man's Guide, and so I was so busy, and I was so excited to run stuff in the world. What I would love,
first thing to go when something had to go to write the book.
I stopped playing in Provokers.
Because we all were, you know what I mean? Like we're all like, hey guys, we have better things to do writing this book than playing in this world. Yeah.
What my dream has been, and I'm open, if anyone in the chat has suggestions to this, James, if you have suggestions to this, what my dream is to have something called like, Dragon Grin, fragments. And the idea is that everyone who wants to be a part makes a level 3 character, and that character is just alive in the world. They're in Dragon Grin. And then I post an interest post, and we basically have a drop-in, drop-out campaign, and you make a living Dragon Grin character where it's like, oh yeah, I'm in that version of Dragon Grin. In the past, it's kind of been hard to do because I wasn't an experienced enough GM to realize that I need to make it all take place in one region to start with. Yeah. And so it was kind of harder to have those sessions connect because they're doing this thing way over here on the other side of the world, and like it doesn't really, you're never going to run into the other characters.
Yeah.
So that's all, kind of doing it that way. I think I would probably set it in Grin, maybe in this story I'm telling. Not literally put them in the place of these characters I'm talking about, but that
like
would
the
be
same
going
universe
on.
That this would happen. Yeah.
Like you could run into, John Missive Crow.
Yeah, you might hear about him or see him, or like if a big event happens in it, you'd see it in the game.
Exactly. So, but that would be the idea. So yes, I would love to run more Dragon Grin, and I think that is the unifying factor that I was missing. Is I was trying to run games all over the realm, and it was feeling like I was running games all over the realm. I think I would make a living Dragon Grin game where it was like, hey, make a character that's in Grin, which would be anybody. You could be from anywhere. You could be traveling.
You just need a reason to be there. That's it.
Yeah, and then just do like different stories around Grin. I think that would be really fun. And it's drop in, drop out. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think, answers the question quite well. Shock 1999 asked if you recommended Boinky Ploxors, and I told him that yes, that you loved Peaky Blinders and that you recommend it for sure.
I will say with that recommendation, you have to give it a good 3 episodes because it is very throw you into the deep end.
Yeah. That's the thing. I'm like, listen, if somebody recommends it and I don't give it more than an episode, that's on me.
That's true. By this, I think it was the end of the second episode, beginning of the third, we were like, oh, okay, this is a great show. So much swearing. There are as many swears as there are regular words. So you just, if that kind of stuff bothers you, then don't.
Then not for you.
Like an edited version wouldn't make sense.
Exactly. Rob mentioned, yes, purposeful writing that contributes to the immediate story and sweeping arcs alike. No filler episodes or characters or chapters. That's one of the cool things when you're not writing for like a specific amount of episodes or something. You don't have to do a filler episode, and I like that. Mapronomicon made a joke about our big old fat Lords of Ash. And Zachary says, Pesky Blinders, everybody's naming the show something different, is where they get their Irish accent for gaming.
Oh, yeah, same. I did a one-shot, and I was like, oh, I'm Tommy Shelby.
The way to learn accents is to watch TV shows and just keep quoting the characters, and you will, like, get better at them. I have only improved by quoting TV shows with British people in them. Mm-hmm. Cole Sparks mentioned missive crows are like the audience for a lot of huge events, so they make the perfect narrator. You know, as we discussed, they'll see a lot of things. And Bronhitis, Alex said, whoever came up with the missive crow name and concept should be crowned the official RPG badass. It's one of my favorite concepts in Dragonrun. It's such a cool thing. Like, I could see a whole game based around being a type of courier, because like a transporter style game, because it's so cool.
Yeah, I'll take that crown.
Right, yeah. Cole mentioned make them complicit somehow when we were talking about how they'll get into the story. There was another cool thing here. Oh, Zachary said, do the Shakespeare thing, lay out the scene for the audience and the characters just exist within the narrative. The audience will start predicting what happens and they can't truly know. That sounds like the first 3 episodes of Peaky Blinders, if anybody ever described them.
Yes, that is exactly
right. What you just described, where they're like, they don't feed it to you. Eventually you get there. Cole mentioned, so a West Marches style thing. That's what, yes, it's going to be that way, Rob said. Hellmage says, Nito Burrito. Looking forward to seeing how it goes. And Zachary, when you get a steady Dragonrun game going, I'll volunteer's tribute. And Shock, I am down. I was binging Expanse in hopes of it becomes R-rated in later seasons. They got pretty crazy. I haven't watched the latest season, but we watched the first 4, and I'm like, that show doesn't shy away. It's not R-rated, I guess, but I don't know. They said the F word a lot in that 4th season, I thought.
It's PG-16.5.
Yeah, I don't remember now, because I'm like, I think when it became an Amazon show, they just were like swearing all over, but maybe I just misremember.
So I was just going to say, so to answer and what Cole said and then what Rob echoed, just to kind of give you an idea of like, what does West March's campaign mean? There's a specific style of game that became popular where, so the answer is yes, that's exactly what it would be like. There's not a specific time that everyone plays, so everything's scheduled when you can. It's very like seat of your pants, where it's like, hey, let's play another game sometime soon. Oh, what are you doing next week? Second thing is there's not a regular group of players. There's not a cast. There's just different players that are pulled from like, a pool, like you say. And then there's not really any like ongoing plot like it's a novel. It's very
it's kind of like an MMO where it's like,
yes,
all the things are happening and you get like different squads. It creates a really cool community when you can get them going and have a bunch of people running it and stuff.
And then you decide like, hey, for this game I want to really explore, Titans. And the cool thing about it is you've already got a lot of shared references, so you can now introduce strange concepts because people have a benchmark. So yeah.
Yeah. Mother Puffer asked Tim, and do all the normal D&D classes persist in your Dragonrun world without major alterations?
That is a really, really good question. The first thing I was going to say is that Mapronomicon says he needs Lord of Ash themed foods. That's amazing. I could probably spend 30 minutes just coming up with puns and cool things of like what that would be. But yes, all of the D&D classes do persist. They all have the same name, but are also known by other names in the world. And in the book we wrote, A Dead Man's Guide to Dragonrun, there are 2 subclasses for each of the major classes. So, yes, they all exist. Some of them are a little more rare than others. They do have like kind of thematic names, but are also known as their normal 5e names, so there's no confusion. And in the book, there are 2 brand new, fully play-tested subclasses for each one.
So yes, and yeah, there's like a lot of really cool thematic stuff about each one and playing them in the world, and it's really cool. Like we tried our best to fit them in there, and I think we did a pretty good job.
Roasted squab and flesh of goat, says James. Cole says blackened chicken creme brulee.
Right, I'm like, those are just good foods. Oh, I think a lot of jerk seasonings and hot spicy stuff. Now I just imagine the Lords of Ash getting together doing hot ones. Trying the new hottest spicy sauce they got from the 10th.
That's amazing. Oh, and Jeremy is here from the Erasmus Expedition. So we actually just did our campaign wrap party over on Jeremy's channel. If you're not subscribed to the Erasmus Expeditions, I highly recommend clicking his name and going over and subscribing. Some of the best live plays I think that are around. Very cool vibe, and they're all very tightly written campaigns. Really good stuff. But we just finished over there and then came over here. And yes, Zach, it was great talking to you. Have a good game tonight yourself. But yeah, that's pretty much the stuff that I wanted to talk about. You know,
yeah,
I am excited about all the things. And if there are any ideas that you have about what you'd like to see in a Dragon Grin game, but yeah, what I'm looking to do now that, especially like I have a lot of commitments that have just finished. A Dead Man's Guide is in the process of shipping. I just finished Whispers and Fragments, so I've got some more free time. I think I'm looking to do a West Marches style Dragon Grin game set in Grin, and then just tell that story in my own little version of Dragon Grin, and then slowly branch out with other things that may or may not happen in that.
Yeah, I think that's awesome.
This is where I start to jump the shark and try to think of ways to go to different regions, and I'm like, oh, what if... And I'm like, I'm thinking too big. Maybe just keep it.
Well, and that's what's interesting is you want to go to other regions, but only because they exist, right? But I'm like, think of all the cool places you can go down the street from the rest of the story. Yeah, probably all the, you know, where I'm like, I know what you mean, but yeah. You get to go there later, and like Star Wars. Eventually you'll get to the desert world, you know?
Right, and that's the thing, is that I really need to consider the fact that if you look at like a map of Dragon Grin, if you're in Grin, you're close to Varnholm. You could take a boat to Aquianis or Jahar. It's not like you're so far away from those places.
And so, okay, and that's the important thing. They can go all over. But that's another pattern I've been thinking about, is a lot of RPGs don't do this, and I think they could gain a lot from this, is having sort of a hub that you always return to. And I think some do it implicitly, sort of, but I like the idea that it always ends when you get back to town, like your main place, you know, and then you can talk about the different people that are there and the different things, and you get into, like, habits, and then this is the way that you subvert what they expect and stuff, you know.
Right.
And I like that because then you can still go to those places. Because the problem before was that the different adventures didn't intersect. So you still go to Varnholm to get an artifact, but then they overlap with something else that's happening to somebody in Grin in one of the other, you know, stories. Or maybe like fantastic. Two groups try to go find it at the same time, you know, things like that. Then you get to do fun stuff like that. So
yeah, I think that's actually really smart. Well, I guess we'll come to a close here shortly, but so Jason Delavale, correct me if that's the wrong way to pronounce that. Jason D, love you guys. You're a big inspiration for my games in general. Thank you. That really does mean a lot, because we're just trying to do our thing and play games. And the fact that it helps inspire others is great, because that's how I learned, was like watching other people that I was inspired by and saying, I think I could do that. Rakame says, I am now rolling up a level 3 character. Absolutely. And that's the thing. Any kind of source material is welcome. You don't have to be a flat out full-blown Dragon Grin character. And this is probably a great time to mention that there's a free character creation kit on our website and on DriveThruRPG, where it has all of the heritages and cultures. It doesn't have the class stuff in there, but it does have the heritages and cultures, so you could absolutely make a level 3 in Dragon Grin. Crucian Human, who was a red sail merchant and gained the power of a wizard. That's awesome. You know what's funny? We layered so much into the cultures that sometimes adding a class on top of it is something I'll forget to do.
Yeah.
Sounds
Which
crazy.
I like it because it to me, it makes the class less of a narrative thing and more a mechanical thing. Which is cool because that means that the stories in Dragon Grin should be more unique because you don't have a ranger, you have a Carusian human, you know.
Exactly. Who happens to know the wilderness and things like that. Yeah, so
exactly.
That's great. But I think that's what I'm going to do, and I think what I'll do is I will favor those people who have posted interest in some of my other stuff first. Like, hey, I'll throw you into a game first, and maybe just try to do one every couple of weeks, make it fun. Yeah. The other thing about those kinds of games, in my opinion, it doesn't have to be a 4-hour session.
Yeah.
It can be a couple of encounters. It can be an hour. It could be one role-playing encounter. I want to kind of keep them like Twilight Zone-y, where it's like, this is just a lean hour of cool Dragon Grin stories. Because then we can do more. I could even do multiple on one night. Like plan 2 hour-long sessions in a 4-hour block. Exactly. So that you have plenty of time in between. And so, cool. Is there anything else you want to hit on before we wrap up?
No, this was great. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. Let's see here. Yeah, Matthew says he's still got that cheeky dwarf wizard on standby from some time ago. That backstory he told me is so good. It's some of the coolest stuff. It has nothing to do with Dragon Grin. He's just a great storyteller.
That's awesome.
And then Cole Sparks says, and the character creation kit is an awesome intro. Yeah, it has the primer and everything about Dragon Grin. And Cole mentioned, kind of echoing what you said, you're not defining the characters by what they do. It's more about who they are.
I like that. Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will definitely have more videos here in the coming weeks that we'll be posting. But in the meantime, keep an eye out in the Absolute Tabletop Facebook group for a West Marches style Dragon Grin campaign set in Grin. If you're interested in some of the concepts that James mentioned on Imagine It Better, those modular RPG pieces, you can check out our Patreon, patreon.com/tabletop terrors. And you can find all kinds of game design tips and videos and some of what we call chunks, which are just pieces of content. And Rob, good luck with your game. And thank you. And I guess we'll end it there. So, James, are you ready for a Tabtarian toast?
Yeah. May you mend the first break.
May you kill the first snake.
May you conquer everything you undertake.
Sláinte.
Sláinte.